Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today I have a Pool 1 Kazar Zoo build for you, and not just any Kazar Zoo build, but what I feel like is one of the best Kazar Zoo builds that are out there. The only thing that I would mix in would be an Elektra, but I don't have her quite yet, but it still runs phenomenally even without her. So in my testing, I tested pretty extensively for about 50 games, and over the course of those 50 games, I had a win rate of 68% with this deck, and I had an average cube gained per game of around 3, just over 3, but it was a small fraction. And so the idea of this list is to be able to flood all of your cards that you draw onto the board, no matter what order you draw them in. And that way you can either trigger your strong guy, which is going to give you a pretty big buff with his ongoing ability of if your hand is empty, you get +6 power, to be able to buff up all of the one-cost cards that you have in your list with cards like Kazar, with cards like Blue Marvel. You have America Chavez in there as a consistency driver. So she's an okay turn 6 drop, but her main draw is that she won't be drawn into your hand before turn 6. This means that you're going to draw into your Kazar more often, your Blue Marvel more often, your Angela more often when they are more impactful. Because if you draw into an Angela on turn 6, it's rarely impactful. But if this helps you draw into it a turn earlier, a lot of times you can maneuver that to push more power than you would have otherwise. And so kind of running through the entire deck list, we have Ant-Man, who is a good card for whenever you're flooding the board or you have a zoo deck, which the aim of a zoo deck is to flood as much power onto the board and as many cards onto the board as you possibly can. And so then we have Hawkeye, another great card for zoo-style decks. He's going to get stronger if we do a follow-up card drop in that lane after the turn that we drop him. And then we have Korg. Korg is going to shuffle a rock into the opponent's list. This offers a little bit of disruption. If they end up drawing into a rock, that's a dead draw. They don't get one of their better resources, but he also fits into that one-cost slot pretty well and is a pretty flexible card. A lot of times I like to drop him on turn 1 if I have him in hand. That way they have as many chances to draw into that rock as possible. And then we have Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is going to be great because we can drop him on the board and maneuver him around to different locations depending on where the opponent pushes their power or what locations reveal over the course of the game. And then we have Rocket. Rocket has the on reveal if your opponent played a card here +2 power. This means if you match the lane that the opponent played in, this is going to be a 1-cost 4 power card before any buffs get taken into effect. We have Blade. Blade is my personal favorite in this list because he helps trigger your strong guy. You can use Blade in a pretty tricky way so that you can hold him and strong guy towards the very end of the game. That way on that last turn you could drop both strong guy and Blade. You can get rid of one of your other cards, primarily your Chavez that you drew into. That way you can guarantee you get the 10 power play of strong guy, and you get a couple of other powerful plays as well in things like your Blade. Maybe you have another 1-cost like Ant-Man or Korg to throw on the board as well. And then we have Angela. Angela is the queen of tempo. She is the queen of value. If you're flooding cards, you want Angela in your deck. Angela is going to get stronger the more cards that are played in her lane. So we can use this to flood the lane. I personally like to drop a Nightcrawler in there and then cap it out with Nightcrawler having that movement capability still. That way on that last turn, we can maneuver him away. We can put something a little bit stronger in there, and it protects the lane from any kind of negative effects that might come its way. And then we have Wolfsbane. Wolfsbane is going to be great in quite a few scenarios. She's very flexible. With a zoo list, we're typically going to have a full lane, and she can be dropped into a full lane to become a 3-cost 7 power card, which is phenomenal. We have Kazar. He has the ongoing ability your 1-cost cards have +1 power, which is why our deck list leans so heavily to 1-cost cards. He is the bread and butter of this list, and he really makes this whole archetype possible. And then we have Strong Guy. Strong Guy at face value is just a 4/4, but if you can trigger his ongoing ability consistently, he becomes a 4/10, which is amazing for his cost line. Then we have Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel at 5 cost is amazing. He's going to further buff all of the other cards that you have on the board, whether they're 1 cost or any other cost that you have on the board. All of them are going to gain +1 power, which is a huge power push, especially when you're considering that you're going to have 8 to 10 other cards on the board. That means his value is anywhere between 10 to 11 to maybe even 12 value over the course of the entire game. And then finally we have Chavez. She cannot be drawn into your hand before turn 6, and so therefore she allows us to play our other cards more consistently and know exactly what we're going to draw into on that final turn. But that is the rundown of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, so first up we have the Daily Bugle. It comes in and it gives us their Wolverine, which is not a phenomenal card, but it gives us a little bit of information into what they have. If we end up discarding that with Blade, it will jump straight onto the board, which is a decent value. But a lot of times Wolverine is just kind of lackluster in a deck list. And so the second one is going to be the Bifrost. That's going to push all of our cards. And so with them running something like Squirrel Girl, this lane is probably going to get pretty full pretty quickly. So I think we're going to go ahead and just play Wolverine naturally onto the board. I don't like dropping Blade early, because if we drop Blade early, a lot of times he might discard some of our more priority cards, like Strong Guy or Blue Marvel. We want to hold Blade for that very last turn so that we can do a surprise drop and kind of sneak that ongoing ability of Strong Guy onto the opponent. And so Sakaar actually pulls into our Blue Marvel, which is really, really big. I think we're feeling confident enough at this point. We have a really expensive unit out on the board. They got a 2 cost on the board out of Sakaar. We got a 5, and it's one of the ones we would have naturally dropped or wanted to drop over the course of the game. That's going to make it much easier for us to trigger Strong Guy in the long run. And I think just overall, we're probably going to have a pretty easy win condition here. And so we're going to drop Wolfsbane in the far left lane just to have that one kind of primed. We're not going to cap it out just yet. If you cap it out early, a lot of times that gives the opponent some very specific information about how much power you're running or what you have. And so we don't necessarily want to drop it before we absolutely have to. And so here I'm going to drop our Kazar. On turn 5, we do have something like maybe a Blue Marvel, depending on what we draw into. Maybe we play some of our lower cost cards, or maybe we just do a Hawkeye and a Strong Guy. That way we can finish off the game with the Blade and the Nightcrawler. We're going to discard our Chavez. That way we can make sure that Strong Guy triggers once he's down on the board. And actually, we already win this lane. We don't need that much power there, but we're gonna go ahead and stack it just in case they have something like a Blue Marvel themselves. Actually, we're going to stack Hawkeye into Sakaar. We're going to put Strong Guy into the Bifrost. I don't think we have any issues winning this lane, but I honestly don't think we have any issues winning this one either, because all of our 1-cost cards are going to get buffed up by 2 between Kazar and Blue Marvel, and they don't have any way to combat it. So this one should be a pretty straightforward win. Because they are so far down, they're not going to snap back, so it will likely end in either a 2-cube or a 4-cube, or a 4-cube game, but that's okay. We don't need an 8-cube. 4-cube is plenty sufficient for us. So we could either do Chavez, which is going to be a bigger power push here, or we could do a Blade, which is going to be about a 6 power push. It's going to add 2 power for Hawkeye. It's going to add 3 power, so that's 5, and then 6 and 7 between these cards. And then we can also add Nightcrawler on the board. And it triggers our 6 power bonus from Strong Guy. So as far as stat line goes, we're pushing more stats onto the board by going this play path and letting our Strong Guy trigger. And this is one of those that, yes, Sakaar pulled into our big resource, but even if not, we had the resources. We could have dropped Blue Marvel last turn. This turn we could have done something like Strong Guy plus Blade plus Nightcrawler, and I think we could have gotten through our entire hand either way. And so pretty straightforward win, one up and one down. That is the power of the Kazar Zoo. Let's jump into the next match. Next up we have Chris Pratt. Next up we have Mario. It's me. And in the first location is Atlantis. That benefits from only having 1 card, but with us having a Zoo style deck, there's very, very few scenarios where we ever just run 1 card in a location. And so let's go ahead and throw our Ant-Man onto the board. If at all possible, we usually don't like to skip or lose out on playing our energy unless we have some kind of cost reduction like Elysium on the board. At that point, we can afford to skip a couple of turns, hold our resources, and kind of strategically choose where we want them. And so now with the Superflow, that gives us an extra energy. We can kind of be a little bit more strategic in where and how we drop our cards. I think we're going to drop Angela into the far right lane. I think we're going to gamble that it's not going to be a negative location. Now, that sometimes can bite you. It could be the Space Throne. It could end up just being absolutely awful. But it could also just give you a tempo advantage over there. And so it's going to be nowhere. On reveals are not going to happen here. So cards like our Blade, our Wolfsbane, we're not going to want to play those over there. But we can still play things like Kazar and Blue Marvel, and that actually protects them from any kind of counterplay, any kind of Enchantress that might take away those abilities. Nowhere's actually going to protect us. And so if we hadn't already snapped, I'd snap at this point. We have a pretty good hand. We have the power advantage on them because they played Quicksilver before the Super Flow showed up. And it just gives us a good tempo swing versus them. And so they are going to lean pretty heavily into the Super Flow. So I think we're probably going to need to compete for Atlantis and Nowhere. And I think we have a pretty good shot at being able to do that. We can do this turn. We still have the extra energy, so we can do something like Korg. So we can do something like Nightcrawler, Korg, and we might even want to do an early Wolfsbane here. That will buff this lane up quite a bit. We have the Kazar buff that's going to buff up our Korg, our Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler can always move somewhere else on the board. And then hopefully we're hoping to draw into something like our Strong Guy, maybe a Blue Marvel next turn. No matter what we draw into next turn, we'll be able to play both Blade and that card so that we're free to drop our Captain Marvel on that final turn and not have to worry about losing out on power potential or card potential because of the Super Flow. The Super Flow helps us kind of flood our hand even more, and at that point we can get even more strategic about how we drop it. And so they have a pretty big Atlantis lane already, but I mean we're close. We're still in the mix. Nightcrawler, Hawkeye's not what you want to see right here. Going into turn 6, we will get our Chavez. We can do something like this. I think they probably leave the Nowhere location alone. But I think we play one more card over there. I'm going to play Hawkeye into the Super Flow just to give us a little bit of flexibility. If we want to move our Nightcrawler over, we can. I will probably drop our Chavez here, just because this is the one that we're closest in power. They're close to being capped out, and playing Chavez here will give us an Ant-Man bonus as well, so it's going to be an extra 3 power on top of whatever we drop, on top of the Chavez 9 power that we drop. And so let's go ahead and lock this one in. We have a lot of leftover energy. It's just, it is what it is. We didn't draw into one of our high-cost cards, but had we not drawn into the Super Flow, we would have needed those lower cost or lower curved cards. And so it is kind of one of those give and takes. If you draw into something like Elysium, you're going to lose out on what you could have gained. Otherwise, you're going to have an absolute advantage in card drops versus your opponent because yours are curved in a very low way. So you can use them in a lot of different ways so that you can push a lot of sneaky power into different lanes on that final turn when you know when you know more information about where that power is going to be most beneficial to you. So let's drop our Chavez into the far left lane. I don't see a scenario where they come up over this. I think they've already moved their Nightcrawler. I think they played it originally in Superflow and they moved it to Atlantis. And so let's go ahead and play it in the left lane. I don't see any scenario where they come up over our power in Nowhere. So I think overall we should be pretty good. I don't think this is a difficult match up at all. And so that is now 2 up and 2 down. That one is an 8-cube match. And we just had the traditional Chavez finish. We had the easy curve and a pretty straightforward match. Let's go ahead and jump into one more and see if we can get another big cube gain. All right, so next up we have Nox. And in our starting hand, we have Korg, Blade, Wolfsbane, and Strong Guy. So we have 2 of the card combo, the 2-card combo, to make sure that we can do a 10 power push plus on one of the last few turns. And so if we have it down to where we can get rid of all of our cards on that 5th turn, we can actually drop Strong Guy and Blade and then still play our Chavez naturally on 6. But that really depends on what we draw into, how we can play, what that curve line looks like. But it is a possibility. We're not going to drop Blade because it's just too risky. It's a 50-50 shot of what it discards into, and we just can't afford to lose our Strong Guy. That is one of our big power components and power pushes with this deck, and we can't afford to lose it. Now, Project Pegasus is actually pretty helpful. We can do a Strong Guy into a Wolfsbane. I think we hold the lower cost cards. I think we get the high cost ones out. That way, if we draw into things like our Kazar, like our Blue Marvel, we can use those and combo those with other cards. So with our Rocket, with our Blade, to have even more upside. And they snap. I think we give it one turn, see what they play and what it looks like, and then we will probably snap back. And so they stacked a lot of power into Project Pegasus. That tells me we're going to avoid the Project Pegasus lane. We're going to stack into the Icebox and into New York. Ooh, but they can move their Iron Man on that final turn. that can get pretty interesting pretty quick. I think we still play it out. Let's go ahead and act like we're playing our cards into Project Pegasus, and then I think we shift them over into New York on that final turn. New York always adds a really weird element of like mind game, because you don't know if your opponent's going to move their cards. You don't know exactly what it looks like, honestly. And so here, let's go ahead and I think we play our Rocket here. We play Hawkeye, and then we go ahead and play our Blade as well. That will trigger Strong Guy. We can move any and all of these cards over into New York on that final turn, and then we can focus on dropping our Chavez on that last turn. Ooh, so they actually cap out the New York location, which is great. That means that they're not going to be able to shift their cards over. I think they messed up pretty big, because now we have the insight of knowing exactly how much power they have in this lane, and we can shift our cards. So we get a really, really big advantage versus what they can do. So knowing that we already have 13 power here, and that we're going to have a really big power push here, I think we maneuver the majority of our cards, or at least the high cost ones, or at least the high power ones, and we drop a Chavez as well. So by triggering our Strong Guy, that's going to push us up to 18. Now, if they have a Hulk in this zoo list, we get beaten, but Hulk doesn't usually fit into a Kazar zoo. And so I'm going to bet on either a Chavez or maybe a Blue Marvel. And so Blue Marvel is going to be 3, 4, 5, 6. And so that would push them. And so that would push them up to 14. We have them beat here. That would add 4 more here, which would be 15. We have them beat here. So let's go ahead and snap back. Unless they have a weird out-of-pocket Hulk into this list, I think we should be okay. I don't think we have much issue winning. Of course, we give up the Project Pegasus lane, but they flooded too much power onto the board. Okay, so Mr. Fantastic pushes a little bit of power over there, but it's nowhere near enough to get the job done. And actually, we should have looked and knew that they only had that one card. That is the only card they had in their hand, which makes it even harder for them to have that win condition. But that is why playing around and playing with the locations is so important. By being able to have that strategic decision of if we want to shift our cards on that final turn, it allowed us to find a win condition when the opponent kind of put themselves into a corner by playing too many cards too quickly. And so that is going to be the last game of the video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to leave it a like down below and ask any questions that you might have as far as the game. I am a wealth of knowledge and I will try to respond to each and every one of you as quickly as possible. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.